You remind me I have to update my website. I'm actually a full professor, but one day, have been for years. I'm really happy to be here moderating this session, and I'm really excited about the amazing social roboticists that are going to join me here today. First, I just wanted to have us maybe think a little bit about this question of what are robots for good. I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. And one idea of robots for good that comes to people's minds is, for example, the description that Rodney Brooks gave in his book, Flesh and Machines, which comes to my mind as a maybe typical definition that people talk about. And one of the things he says is, well, one thing we can see in technology is that it actually increases the quality of life for people everywhere, all through time. And that makes me pause and think, is that true? Is that true for every place? Is it true for everyone? And I think if we think about it, we know that it's not exactly true. Maybe if we compare ourselves to the queens and kings of today, we have a better yesteryear, we have a better standard of living, but not everybody has the same standard of living. We also have great inequalities in society, geographically, in different places. And so I think that makes us understand that it's not technology on its own that is actually producing the good. We first need to understand what our social problems are that are causing our issues, and we need to start from there in order to design technology. And I think today our speakers are all going to speak to this in some way by talking about their human-centered approaches to technology design. And so first to the stage, I would like to invite Ginevra, from Uppsala University, who's going to talk about robots for good in education.
So hello, everyone. And today I'm going to talk about social robots in education, and I will give examples of what advancing social robots for good in education means. So social robots have shown promising results in education, facilitating children's learning of STEM, second language learning, or reading, just to name a few, in the classroom and at home as a support for teachers or for parents. And my research team has been working for years on robots in education, and we know that robots can do good for children. But what is good, and how can we make sure that we avoid situations where social robots do not do good? So advancing social robots for good in education means building robots that have measurable benefits for users, but also identifying and limiting possible negative consequences. So let me give a few examples from my work. In the Animatas projects, in collaboration with colleagues from KTH and the Instituto Superior Técnico Lisbon, we investigated the development of robot storytellers that support primary school children to create stories and develop verbal creativity. So we investigated how an MS robot can do that by inducing emotions in children through a collaborative game. And what we found is that when robots induce positive emotions, children's creativity is higher. And this work is aligned with the 4th UN Sustainable Development Goal, which is about quality education, and specifically about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. And we also developed a similar storytelling application with the Furhat robots made by Furhat Robotics, which we'll speak to in a little bit on stage. So in this case, we were interested in understanding whether children could form a relationship and trust a robot storyteller. But let's take a look at how the interaction between children and robot works. So children interact with a robot like this. It's called Furhat. And they have the opportunity to choose characters, objects, and scenes to create stories on a graphical user interface on a multi-touch table which is located between them and the robot. But let's speak with Furhat. Hello, Furhat.
Hello. Would you like to create a story with me?
Sure. Could you give me some ideas?
Once upon a time, there was a robot that could understand children's emotions.
understand children's emotions, but robots are not human, so cannot really understand children's emotions? Well, let's pretend.
Okay.
So as you could see, the robots can give suggestions for stories, it can ask questions, it can provide encouragement, and this is a very human-like robot, but we can make it look different. So we can make it look more human-like, if you see the pictures to the left, or more machine-like to the right. And what we have found is that children tend to trust the robot and also disclose the information with it. And at least this is what happens with the less human-like robot. But while this trust and connection or even intimacy can be good for a robot that promotes children's learning, so in a learning context, we also need to ask ourselves the questions, is there any point at which such robot could foster too much of this trust, too much of this connection? And well, this depends on many things. It depends on who is in control of the robot, depends on the presence of an adult overseeing the robot's use and making judgment calls. It depends on the robot's ability to be transparent and to explain what it can and cannot do. And these things are important for all AI and technology. But the difference with robots is that they have a physical body, and social robots also have some human-like characteristics that make them more engaging. So these robots have higher agency and even higher chances to affect how we think and behave. So what is the way forward? So, well, in order to work truly in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals and building robots for the societal good, we need to take a responsible approach and build robots with human values in mind, with ethical values in mind. We need to operationalize ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, so AI which is lawful, ethical, and robust. And we need to define standards that work in practice. So we need policy and legal frameworks that regulate negative consequences. We need education reforms to train the next generations on the opportunities, but also challenges of AI. And finally, we need to ask defining questions of what it means to build robots for good. And that's all from me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ginevra, and we'll have some time for us to discuss, and also you to ask some questions at the end. But now we're going to invite Janet Wiles from the University of Queensland to the stage.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a computer scientist. My lab designs social technologies using artificial intelligence and robotics, working with both people and animals, and also the public understanding of AI. So today I want to talk about the design of social technologies for people living at home with dementia. But before I talk about the project, I want to ask you a question. Why don't wheelchairs climb stairs? I don't know if you have a drawer like this at home, but many of us do. A lot of useless tech. Stair climbing wheelchairs are like this. They're expensive. When they break, there's no one to fix them. They're heavy and they don't fit into people's lives. So they're not wanted. The question is, what kind of technologies are? So after falls, the major issue for people living at home with dementia is communication. The longer people can live at home before going into formal care, the better it is for them, for their families, and also for our health systems. So 10 years ago, at the Australian Centre of Excellence for the Dynamics of Language, we started a project called the Florence Project. And we started developing speech and language technologies to support people living at home with dementia. And we started with a clinical model in mind. we did a lot of really great research. We published a lot of papers, software toolkits, but it turns out that a clinical model is not a good idea. Okay, so 2 years into the project, we recruited an occupational therapist, Jackie Little, and an interaction designer, Peter Worthy. And Jackie recruited 20 people who either live with dementia themselves or are carers for people with dementia. And that totally transformed what we do. They changed our goals of what we're aiming to do. They changed our methods for how we work with people. Instead of trying to work out what people couldn't do, we started working with people's strengths, so strength-based approach. So this pivot transformed our project. We had to pioneer new ways of working together. The diagram here, it's quite complicated, but it shows participatory activities, problem spaces, design and development, the metrics and technology, so the AI that's under the hood, but also the applications, the outputs, and of course, research papers. We also learnt a lot about what people really want. So they want to be recognised that everybody is different. Make my day go better, and this became the informal motto of our project. Too often technology is a barrier to people communicating. How do we use technology to connect people together? So what we've built in the last 8 years is a communication system, and it has specialised hardware that makes it easy to use. So this is Daisy. At the heart of the system is a personalised knowledge bank. This is an AI-powered database. It's designed with cybersecurity from the ground up. You can't bolt security on later. It has to be built in from the very beginning. It's under the control of the person with dementia and their family, carers, friends. It contains what they want to remember. So it might be their music, their favourite sports team, when it's on. It's their family, their friends, perhaps who the carers are, what their diary is. So Daisy lives with dementia. She lives at home. You can see her in her own house. And there are 3 different devices that are connected to her knowledge bank. One of them is a music machine. It just has a knob. It looks like an old-fashioned radio, but inside, it's internet-enabled. There's a diary, so her diary can be shown. Early in the disease, she might have quite a complex diary showing. Later on, it might be very simple, just what's happening next. And there's also a family sharing photo album, but it's all protected by the same secure system. So these enhance her quality of life, and they support communication without intruding. So Pete, our designer, calls this calm computing or peaceful computing. All right, so the takeaways from that I would like to leave you with, 3 messages. If you're interested, come and see us in booth 68. But the first part is that great AI tools are necessary, but they're not enough. You can't just have good computer scientists. You need to pioneer, when you work with vulnerable populations, you need to pioneer new ways of working with them, including them in your teams right from the very beginning, from concept design right through to evaluation. And the third thing is to think about what Florence is. Florence contains this personalised knowledge bank. We believe this is a public good that everyone should have. It supports an ecosystem of communication devices, which are hardware devices. We work with a local company to make these, designed to enhance quality of life at home. So building on people's strengths and surrounded by easy-to-use devices, but not disturbed by it. We believe this peaceful vision of the future of communication technology is the future of communication technology for people living with dementia at home. And we hope this is something that a lot of people will join us in this endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I feel calmer already knowing that this is out there. And now we have Arshia Khan from the University of Minnesota, Duluth, and she's going to talk about human-centered social robots for good in her work.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. And I'm from University of Minnesota, Duluth, and I'm going to share my research with you in a moment here. So DECRS is the name of my lab. I'm the director of this lab, and it stands for Dementia and Elderly Care, Robotics, and Sensing. I'm going to talk about the problem I'm addressing, and also I'm going to talk about how I'm addressing that particular problem. So the problem is that people are aging, right? But with this aging, what is happening is more and more people are getting dementia. And well, people aging is good, but people getting dementia is not a very good problem. And the healthcare worker shortages are a major issue in every country. I'm not sure about your countries, but in my country, in the US, yes, it is a big problem. So what can we do? Because the people affected with dementia, they need 24/7 care. They need constant attention, constant monitoring. So healthcare robots are transforming the healthcare industry. Currently, there are a lot of robot-assisted surgeries that are happening all across the world. And all of you are familiar with these kind of surgeries. Robot-assisted rehab is very, very popular as well. So looking at humanoid robots, like Pepper over here, there is great potential to help people affected with dementia. So I have about approximately 20 humanoid robots, Peppers, deployed in a variety of nursing homes across the United States. And some of these robots have been deployed for the last 2.5 years. And we have conducted several clinical trials with these humanoid robots. And some are being conducted continuously at Monarch Healthcare Management. Another one, we just finished a clinical trial at Avantara St. Cloud in South Dakota, which is, mind you, an all dementia nursing home. That means every resident over there has dementia. And we tested them out. What we did was we used them as companion, social engagement, cognitive stimulation, administered therapies, physical well-being, and emotional well-being. These are the various domains that we worked with these humanoid robots. Here is an example. So here, the robot is helping improve the range of motion with physical exercises. Yay! Here, this was the first time she met the robot, and you see her reaction.
Oh, good?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Because this is a question I'm often asked. How do they react?
That is just, who ever thought that up?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Of course, she has dementia, so she kept forgetting every few minutes that, she met the robot a few seconds ago. But so far, I haven't had one single person getting scared of the robots. So here is another video. The little guy who's lying down here is actually leading a yoga session. This was our first session that we did. So after a little while, towards the end of the study, we realized that everybody over there were mostly following the robot. This was just the start. Over here, there's social engagement. to dance with the robots. We have a safety feature in the coding, so it stopped as she started to tackle the robot, and she was surprised at that. Here, this is a very, very interesting video clip where we took a testament from a dentist. And this was actually after the robot had taught the lady in the wheelchair how to brush her teeth.
You to brush, wasn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, it was reminding you that you needed to brush all over the place. Yeah, that was great. I think that's the best you've ever brushed your teeth. And I think the robot was helping you know what to do. Do you think so?
Yeah, I should have white on my pepper.
Let's paint the vitamins on your teeth and you'll be finished.
Here, this is a relaxation. So the robots are also able to administer a variety of therapies.
Breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out.
Here again, there's some more. This is dance therapy, by the way. So we actually have gathered the data. We've conducted several studies, and we realized that we have been able to improve cognition between 0 and 2 points as measured by the MoCA. At this, I'm going to stop. If you have any questions about the kind of studies we conducted, please feel free to ask me.
Thank you very much. What I would like to do now is invite all of our speakers, don't run away, to the stage so we can have a little bit of a conversation. We have about 10 minutes to have a little chat about some of the common points in their work. And as you get seated, I wanted to start with just a question about, all of you talked about human-centered. It's the title of the session. And so when you think of human-centered, what does it mean to you? And also, do you see any tensions between human-centered design and, technology push and pull, between human-centeredness and humanity-centeredness, so going beyond the individual and the social or communal? Can you just tell us a little bit about that from your own work? Do you want to start? Ginevra, you look ready.
Yes. So I think for me, building human-centered social robots means taking a responsible approach and designing robots with ethical values in mind. So we start from human rights, then we look at what are the ethical values that can lead us to a human rights-centered approach to the design of robots, and that can also lead us to identify what are requirements, for example, requirements for trustworthy AI, as the EU ethics guidelines from the European Commission have suggested. And indeed, it could be that we may observe tensions when it comes to the human and humanity, but that doesn't necessarily mean to be that it is the case. I think what's important is to ask ourselves the questions of whether there is any tension between goods, but even more important is to ask the questions, do we really need robots in this application? And does this mean that we achieve good for as many as possible?
Would you like to go ahead, Janet?
Yeah, so adding to that, I think it's not just the ethical things we need, we also need methodological approaches. So many of the robots will be used with vulnerable populations. I think we need new ways of bringing them into the design process. So when we talk about human-centered, as soon as you put technology in with people, you change the balance of the politics between individuals, their carers, their family. So human-centered is looking at the system as a whole and what your technology is doing. you never have you and a robot. There's always someone who has put the robot there, who is near the robot, who is controlling it. The same with all our social technologies. Mostly that's hidden. I think human-centered needs to bring that out. And when we talk about humans, we're not just individuals. We're always part of groups and multiple different groups. Sometimes technology makes us part of a group we're proud to belong to. Sometimes it pushes us into a group we don't want to be identified with. So I think how we put technology into our lives, social technology, it's very important to look at the individual and their identities, their many identities, and the dynamics between them.
So, okay. Thank you so much for saying half of what I wanted to say. And then adding to that, I think it's also about looking at the perspective from the user, you know, what do they need? Do they understand it? Is it going to be useful? How useful is it going to be? Is it, because every technology comes with a caveat, right? There is something that you have to give up in order to get this technology. So what are we giving up? Is it worth giving that up in order to acquire this technology? So looking at it from a human perspective, thinking of it as, how is it going to benefit this person? What is going to happen? What is going to be the outcome of using this technology?
So kind of maybe building off on that, what are some of the most surprising, interesting, surprising things to you that have come out of actually following human-centered design principles? Are there things that you think you found out that maybe would not have come out had you, just kind of designed it first and brought it over and continued from there?
So I just got back from South Dakota, an all-dementia nursing home, and it's amazing the kind of things I learned. My perceptions of what they need are very different from what they actually need. And actually, you have to go live with them and see what they need. Because we can imagine all sorts of scenarios. This is what they need. This is what is going to help them. Unless you are with them and implementing the technology, you will never know what they really need.
What's one thing? And you can think about that too.
Yeah, so one thing that I realized was the technology that we are developing, we are thinking from our perspective, And like, for instance, the sound of the robot, the way it speaks. We are able to understand it, but the elderly are not necessarily able to. So we had to actually Bluetooth into their hearing aids for them to be able to understand the robots better.
What about you, Ginevra and Janet? Do you have some things that are kind of very surprising that...
Not necessarily very surprising, but interesting, I think, is that even when we take a human-centered approach and with users at the very center, is that we find at times very different attitudes toward robots. It's something we have discussed about also yesterday, this ambivalence. So we have users that are really enthusiastic within the same application domain and others that are quite skeptical. And of course, we need to be careful about this, especially if we deal with vulnerable population. But that's something I would say that it is quite interesting and important to take into account.
So adding to that, something that I think also should not be novel, but was, when we started working with people with dementia, we were looking at what they couldn't do. We were looking at their memory deficits, and we had a clinical, a deficit-based approach, and we had to learn that actually people live their lives every day. They're living at home, they're strong in their communities, so you need to look at their strengths. So really good communication technology of the kind we're working with builds on people's strengths. So if they already can use photos, then use photos. And if family can send cardboard postcards, it doesn't need to be high-tech, but if it's online, that's good too. So it's combining all the different ways, not just trying to replace or extend social technologies into robots, whereas social technologies should be connecting people together, not people with technology.
Great point. And I'm going to ask one kind of last question to make us think, which is obviously, working on technology design, and then when technologies are designed, using them, consumes a significant amount of resources. So we also have to be very kind of clever and careful about how we deploy our resources. How do you think about, when does technology become actually valuable enough for us to resource it versus other things that we might be using those resources for that are not technology and are maybe less shiny? I think that's kind of what you're pointing to also, Janet, but
yeah, so
not as shiny as pepper, but.
so after the engineer goes home, after the computer scientists are out of the room, do people continue to use the technology? Can the technology stand on its own, supported by, repaired by, used by the people who it's there for, without the designers and the roboticists and the engineers in the room? Yeah.
And I would say would go back to the unmet needs. So are robots really needed in a specific application? Do they meet a certain need? And if we see that, yes, indeed, helps are really helping in a specific domain, we have measurable benefits, that's when we can say that even if we may have some tensions between goods, perhaps it is worth it.
Would you like give some closing thoughts, Arshia?
I think that understanding what the user needs, of course, after the engineer leaves, what is happening. And unless you are there to observe what's happening when you are not there, is critical. And that's one of the things that I learned, that you need to see how they're on their own. It is really important. And that's how you go back and fix the things that you created that will be better utilized by these people.
Thank you. Now I'm going to stare over there and say, do we have time for a user question? Yes. So I wonder, do any of you have questions for our panelists that you'd want them to answer? Yes, go for it.
Hi, thank you. Really fascinating. My question is to Arshia. I was just wondering, do you have thoughts on how to make robots more cost-effective? We can all see the benefits, especially through the videos, but it seems like a really costly project. Thanks.
Absolutely. This is an extremely expensive project, not only for the user, but for the developer as well as the researcher. So to combat that, what we are doing is actually building an in-house robot. So we are working on that. We are hoping this robot is going to cost less than $10,000, and it will be culturally adaptive.
Any other questions? So we can close slowly, but I'm just wondering, does anybody have any other thoughts you'd like to share? Ideas that maybe you want to leave in the minds of folks about how to do human-centered robotics, or why to, or, I think the other thing about human-centered robotics that may not be clear until you start doing it is the amount of effort it takes to really engage with users of different kinds in different contexts outside the lab. I think what all of you are pointing to is kind of going into their world rather than bringing and taking your technology into their world rather than bringing them into your own space. So do you have any words of maybe encouragement for folks who might want to consider this difficult but really rewarding path?
I can start. So we have to start somewhere, right? The robots are very expensive currently, but there is a big need for these kind of robots. And we have to start somewhere. Unless someone starts and somebody picks it up and continues, we will not progress. So pick it up and continue.
And I would add that research in social robots for good, if we really think about good, is also expensive in terms of resources. And even if now human-robot interaction is a field that has gained a lot of momentum, studies that explore robots' perception in the real world in the long term are still pretty rare, and are really expensive in terms of staff, in terms of the ability to find the participants that will continue to interact with the robot for a long time. But it's a path that we need to take if we really hope to build robots for good.
So I would like to add to that it's not just social robots, but also social technologies we should be thinking about, and that it should be everything from the very simple right through to the very complicated. And at the heart of how we interact with all of these technologies is our own personal data. So when we think about how to design, we also need to think about who owns that data, and our own personal data should be like the electricity in your house. It belongs to you. Data that is from an individual, whether it's someone living with dementia in care at home, or whether it's children, there is social data there that's critical. I think we should be thinking about building in cybersecurity from the ground up around that data and how we use it, and then how we integrate that into all our different social technologies.
Thank you very much. I think that's a wonderful thought of kind of maybe we enjoy our technologies sometimes at the interface, but we also really have to focus on what's under the hood from the very beginning. And so I want to thank our panelists. I hope you're inspired.
Hey.